Imagine discovering something that could make your brain so sharp, you could master any skill in minutes. You'd become the smartest person in the world. That's exactly what happens to the hero of our story today. At the beginning of the story, we meet a man named Eddie. Eddie dreams of becoming a writer, and after a long time, he finally gets a chance to write a book for a publisher. But he hasn't written a single word yet. Every day he writes a little, but then erases it because he's unsure of himself. Eddie feels lost and worried about his future. His failure in life pushes his girlfriend, Lindy, to leave him. Before Lindy, he was married to a woman named Melissa, but she also left him for the same reasons: Eddie's laziness and lack of success. Feeling hopeless, Eddie is wandering through the city, heading back to his apartment, when he runs into Varna, the brother of his ex-wife Melissa. They sit at a cafe and start talking. Eddie shares all the struggles in his life, explaining how he feels confused and stuck. Varna, understanding Eddie's situation, decides to help him. He gives Eddie a pill. At first, Eddie laughs, thinking, "How can this small pill change my life?" But Varna explains that it's not an ordinary pill. He tells Eddie that once he takes it, all his confusion will disappear, and he'll be able to do anything he wants brilliantly. Before leaving, Varna gives Eddie his card so they can stay in touch. Desperate to change his life, Eddie decides to take the pill before heading into his apartment. On his way up the stairs, he runs into his landlady. She angrily reminds him about his unpaid rent. At first, Eddie is confused and unsure how to respond. But then, the pill starts to take effect. Suddenly, Eddie feels a surge of clarity. His mind becomes sharper, and he remembers everything he's ever read in his life. He notices a law book in the landlady's bag and tells her, "If I were preparing for an exam, I wouldn't read that book. There are much better options out there." He then shares detailed information about the law, impressing her with his intelligence. Amazed by Eddie's newfound knowledge, the landlady forgets her anger and lets him go. When Eddie reaches his apartment, the first thing he notices is how messy it is. With his newfound energy and sharp mind, he starts cleaning everything at lightning speed. After organizing his apartment, Eddie sits down and begins writing his book. This time, he writes confidently and without any confusion, pouring out all his ideas. The next morning, when Eddie wakes up, the pill's effect has worn off, and he feels like his old self again. But the amazing part is that he managed to finish writing the entire book in just one night. The editor is shocked and can't believe how quickly Eddie managed to complete the book. Later, when Eddie gets back home, he receives a voice message from the editor. She tells him how impressed she is with his writing, and that she wants to give him more work. Eddie goes to meet Varna and starts praising the pill, amazed at how it changed his life. That's when Varna reveals the truth. The pill is a drug called NGT. He explains that NGT unlocks 100% of the brain's potential, allowing a person to use their mind to its full capacity. Hearing this, Eddie becomes eager for more pills. But before giving him more, Varna says, "First, go to the market and bring me a suit and a burger." Eddie agrees and heads to the market. When he returns with the suit and burger, he is shocked to see that someone has shot and killed Varna. Terrified, Eddie quickly calls the police to report the murder. But as he looks around the room, he begins to understand that someone must have killed Varna for the pills. Before the police arrive, Eddie searches the entire room for the pills. After looking for a while, he finally finds a full packet of them. Along with the pills, he finds a bundle of cash, a small box, and a diary, which he takes with him. Just then, the police arrive. Eddie opens the door and is taken to the police station for questioning. The police interrogate him about the murder, but get little information from him. In the end, they let him go. Back at home, Eddie takes another pill. Once again, his mind becomes incredibly sharp. Determined to change his life, Eddie writes another book, completing it in just 4 days, and hands it over to the editor. This time, he doesn't stop there. He begins learning new skills like speaking foreign languages, playing cards, and improving his fitness. He also starts making new friends and talking confidently about various topics. During this time, Eddie meets a stockbroker named Kevin, who gives him his card. Eddie also gets invited to a beach party by his new friends, where he enjoys himself. At the party, Eddie has a sudden realization. His true potential lies not in writing, but in making money from the stock market. Eager to explore this idea, Eddie spends a week studying the stock market. With his enhanced brain power, he quickly understands its patterns. Using the $800 he found in Varna's room, Eddie invests in the stock market and earns $2,000 in just one day. However, Eddie realizes that to make even more money, he needs a larger investment. He decides to borrow money from a Russian loan shark named Jerry, who lends money personally. When Eddie meets Jerry, the man agrees to give him $100,000, but warns him with a chilling threat. "If you don't return my money on time, I'll skin you alive and use it as a trophy." Despite the warning, Eddie takes the money and invests it in the stock market. Using his sharp mind and thorough research, Eddie turns the $100,000 into $2 million in just 1 week. His sudden success makes him a sensation in the stock market. People start talking about him everywhere, and Eddie's name begins appearing in newspapers. One day, Eddie meets his ex-girlfriend Lindy. Seeing his confident new look and success, Lindy is impressed. The two rekindle their relationship and start a new chapter in their lives, spending beautiful moments together. While spending time with Lindy one day, Eddie notices a man following them. He decides to ignore it and leaves with Lindy. But the next day, Eddie meets Kevin, the stockbroker, who introduces him to a famous businessman named Carl. Carl is curious about Eddie's success and invites him to discuss the stock market and business. After spending some time talking, Carl is impressed by Eddie's brilliant ideas. On their way back, Carl offers to drop Eddie home in his car. Before leaving, Carl hands Eddie some files. As Eddie reviews the files, he immediately spots several flaws in Carl's company. He suggests solutions to fix these issues, leaving Carl even more impressed with Eddie's sharp mind. Carl invites him to meet again the next day at a specific location. After the meeting, Eddie gets out of Carl's car on the way home and decides to walk for a while. However, during this time, Eddie starts experiencing something strange. This was the side effect of the NGT pill. Eddie becomes disoriented and unaware of his actions. He finds himself in several places without realizing how he got there. First, he's in a club, then at a party, and later, he sees himself romantically involved with a woman. Suddenly, Eddie is at a station where a group of goons attacks him. Although Eddie doesn't know how to fight, his enhanced brain recalls Jackie Chan's fight scenes he had watched on TV. Mimicking those moves, Eddie successfully defeats the goons. Eventually, Eddie finds himself on a highway bridge, completely confused about how he got there. The next scene shows Eddie waking up from sleep. He begins checking the files Carl gave him but decides not to take the pill again. He doesn't want to repeat the strange events of the last 18 hours. However, without the pill, Eddie struggles to make sense of the files. Despite this, he decides to meet Carl as planned, even though his mind is functioning like the old, unenhanced Eddie. When Eddie meets Carl, he finds it difficult to follow the conversation and understand what Carl is talking about. During this meeting, Eddie sees a news report about the girl he was with the night before. She has been found dead in a hotel room. Eddie begins to suspect that he might have been involved in her death, though he can't clearly remember what happened. Overwhelmed with guilt and confusion, Eddie apologizes to Carl and quickly leaves. Outside, Eddie feels sick and starts vomiting. When he gets home, his condition worsens because he hasn't taken the pill for a long time. But Eddie is now determined to learn everything about NGT before using it again. He begins calling the numbers listed in the diary he took from Varna's room. These numbers belong to people Varna used to supply pills to. To his horror, Eddie learns that most of the people who use the NGT pills have died. When he calls the last number on the list, he discovers that the person is the same man who had been following him earlier. The man appears nearby, and Eddie, terrified, runs away. While escaping, Eddie ends up in a cafe where he unexpectedly meets his ex-wife, Melissa. Melissa reveals that she, too, used to take NGT pills. However, due to the severe side effects, she stopped using them. She shows Eddie how quitting the pills has aged her prematurely, making her look much older than she is. Melissa warns Eddie to stop taking the pills, explaining that their addiction is dangerous. She tells him that the drug is slowly destroying their bodies from the inside and is nearly impossible to quit. Melissa advises Eddie to gradually reduce his dosage if he wants to survive. Later, Eddie encounters the Russian loan shark, Jerry, who had lent him $100,000. Jerry angrily attacks Eddie, demanding his money back since Eddie hasn't repaid the loan yet. During the confrontation, Jerry notices a pill in Eddie's hand. Curious, Jerry forcibly takes the pill and swallows it. Almost immediately, Jerry feels energized and happy. Taking advantage of this, Eddie withdraws money from the bank and repays Jerry before leaving. Now Eddie's condition deteriorates further, and he becomes desperate for the NGT pills. He goes to his girlfriend Lindy's office and collapses there. Seeing Eddie in such a terrible state, Lindy asks him what's wrong. Eddie explains everything about the drug and begs her to bring the pills from his apartment. Lindy agrees and heads to Eddie's apartment to get the pills. But on her way back, the same mysterious man who had been following Eddie for days begins chasing her. Terrified, Lindy runs as fast as she can. She hides behind a big rock and calls Eddie to tell him everything. Eddie advises Lindy to take a pill. She listens to him, takes the pill, and soon her brain begins to work much faster. With her enhanced abilities, she successfully escapes from the scene. Afterward, Lindy returns to Eddie and gives him a pill to help him as well. The next day, Lindy asks Eddie to quit the drug, explaining that she had only taken it once and would never take it again. She encourages him to stop using it as well. Eddie replies that he cannot quit right now because he still has some work left to do. He asks Lindy to give him some time to gradually quit the habit. Lindy agrees, and Eddie takes the pill again. However, Eddie finds a way to minimize the side effects. He decides to reduce the dosage, avoids drinking alcohol with it, and ensures he eats on time, which helps limit the negative effects of the drug. With his mind now working incredibly fast, Eddie starts making smarter decisions. First, he makes a suit with a hidden pocket to keep his pills safe. He also meets with a chemist, gives him one of the NGT pills, and asks him to create a version without any harmful side effects. Eddie pays the chemist a large sum of money, asking him to complete the task within 6 months. As Eddie continues to work, he partners with the same businessman, Carl, and helps take his company to the top. Eddie also makes significant profits in the stock market, investing Carl's money along with funds from other wealthy businessmen. Eventually, Eddie becomes a successful stockbroker, and within no time, he becomes a millionaire. However, one day, a police officer catches Eddie when a video surfaces, showing him with the dying girl at a hotel. Eddie immediately calls his lawyer, and after hearing the whole story, the lawyer manages to get Eddie released. But when Eddie later checks his suit pocket for his pills, he realizes that the pills are gone. He quickly understands that his lawyer must have stolen the pills. Meanwhile, Jerry, the Russian man who had once loaned Eddie money, is still after him, wanting more pills. Eddie manages to get rid of Jerry by giving him a few pills. During this time, Eddie is working on a major merger between Carl's company and another large corporation owned by Hank. This deal will raise the stock price significantly, and Eddie stands to gain $40 million from it. But on the day of the merger meeting, Hank's wife shows up instead of him and informs Carl that Hank is in the hospital and that the merger can only proceed once he recovers. As Hank's wife leaves, Eddie sees his driver, the same man who had been following him for days. Eddie quickly realizes that this driver is working for Hank, and that Hank also used to take NGT pills. The driver had been following Eddie because Hank had run out of pills, and without them, Hank's condition worsened dramatically. Later, when Eddie returns home, Jerry shows up at his door, demanding that Eddie open it. When Eddie refuses, Jerry starts trying to break the door down. With no pills left, and not wanting to face Jerry, Eddie decides to end his life. He stands on the edge of the building, ready to jump, but suddenly remembers that he might still have one pill left. He quickly rushes to find it, and, after some searching, he finally locates the pill. But just as he reaches for it, Jerry breaks through the door, entering with 2 men. In the chaos, Eddie panics and falls, dropping the pill, which falls out of his reach. Jerry's men seize Eddie, and Jerry starts demanding more pills from him. At this moment, we see that Jerry doesn't take the pill like Eddie does. Instead, he injects it directly into his veins, hoping that this will last longer. When Eddie refuses to give Jerry the pills, Jerry's men begin searching the entire room for them. During this chaotic search, Eddie seizes the opportunity to attack Jerry. He kills him by thrusting a shard of glass into his stomach. Now, Eddie desperately needs the pill because his own condition is deteriorating. However, as he looks at Jerry's blood flowing out, he remembers that Jerry used to inject himself with the pill. Eddie realizes that the pill would be in Jerry's blood, so he starts drinking it. Surprisingly, it worked, giving him the boost he needed. With renewed strength, Eddie starts taking out Jerry's goons one by one, and eventually manages to escape the scene. Meanwhile, Hank dies in the hospital. Eddie, determined to finish what he started, goes to Hank's driver. He tells him the whole story and asks for help, and the driver agrees. Together, they go to the lawyer's house, where they tie him up and search the place. After a long search, Eddie finally finds the pills again. A year later, Eddie's book has been published, and he has started his own company. He is now a billionaire and is running for president. One day, Carl visits Eddie at his office, fully aware that Eddie takes the NGT pills, which is the source of his intelligence. Carl asks Eddie to work for him, revealing that he has bought the company that manufactures NGT pills and shut down its production. Carl tells Eddie that if he wants to continue taking the pills, he will have to work with him. Just as Carl is about to leave, Eddie gives him an example. He mentions a car coming on the road that will inevitably hit the car in front of it. Within seconds, exactly what Eddie predicted happens. Eddie then tells Carl that he will always be one step ahead, thinking of the future, regardless of whether NGT pills are available in the market or not. Eddie reveals that he has already made his own version of the pill, one without the harmful side effects, and then starts exposing Carl's corrupt business practices. Carl, scared and realizing Eddie's power, quickly leaves the place. The story ends with Eddie and his girlfriend, Lindy, sitting in a Chinese restaurant. Eddie speaks to the waiter in fluent Chinese as he places their order. Lindy watches him, deep in thought, wondering whether Eddie has truly stopped taking the NGT pills, and the story comes to an end.